Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story. Every day we uncover the truth, one secret at a time. My name is Thomas, and I learned something important 3 years ago. Some people will smile at you over the fence while plotting to take what's yours. This is the story of how my neighbor tried to steal my land and how a single survey document changed everything. I bought my house in Ridgemont 5 years ago. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a modest 3-bedroom on half an acre with mature oak trees and a detached garage I converted into a workshop. The property had good bones, and the neighborhood seemed quiet. My immediate neighbor to the east was a man named Gregory Pemberton, late 50s, retired from some middle management position, and apparently very concerned with property values and neighborhood aesthetics. For the first 2 years, Gregory and I had what I'd call a cordial relationship. We'd wave when getting the mail, occasionally chat about the weather or local road construction. He seemed particular about his lawn, always out there with various tools and treatments, but I figured that was his business. My yard was neat enough, though I'll admit I was more focused on the workshop projects than achieving golf course quality grass. The fence between our properties was old when I bought the place. Weathered cedar posts, some leaning, horizontal boards that had seen better days. It ran along what I assumed was the property line, roughly 70 feet from the road back to where both our lots bordered the wooded conservation area. The previous owner's survey from when I purchased showed the fence was about 2 feet inside my property line, which was fine by me. It gave me a buffer. Things started changing in the spring of my 3rd year there. Gregory began making comments. First, it was casual observations. "You know, Thomas, I've been thinking that old fence really brings down both our property values." Then it became suggestions. "We should really replace that together, split the cost, maybe move it over a bit to give us both more usable space." I didn't think much of it initially. I agreed the fence needed replacing eventually, though it wasn't high on my priority list. I'd just started a new contracting job that required long hours, and my weekends were spent catching up on workshop orders. I built custom furniture as a side business, and demand had picked up significantly. Then came the Saturday morning that changed everything. I was in the workshop, sanding down a walnut table when I heard my name being called. I stepped outside to find Gregory standing by the fence with another man, both of them holding clipboards and measuring tape. Gregory waved me over with this tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thomas, good morning. This is Martin, a friend of mine who does property consulting. We were just taking some measurements, and we've discovered something rather concerning." Martin nodded seriously, flipping through papers on his clipboard. He was younger, maybe 40, wearing khakis and a polo shirt with some company logo I didn't recognize. "What's going on?" I asked, wiping sawdust off my hands. Gregory's expression shifted into something like practiced sympathy. "Well, it appears that this fence is actually on my property. According to Martin's measurements and the county records he reviewed, the actual property line runs about 6 feet into what you've been using as your yard." I stared at him. 6 feet? That's impossible. I have a survey from when I bought the place." "Surveys can be wrong," Martin interjected smoothly. "Especially older ones. Property lines shift, markers get moved. I've seen it dozens of times. Mr. Pemberton here has the original plat map from when this neighborhood was developed in 1987, and it's quite clear." Gregory unfolded a photocopy of what looked like an old site plan. "You see here. Thomas, this line represents the true boundary. I'm not trying to cause problems, but I'm planning to sell in the next year or two, and I need this resolved for my title company. That 6-foot strip technically belongs to me. 6 feet along 70 feet of property line. That was over 400 square feet of land, including part of the area where I'd built a small shed 2 years ago and the section where I'd planned to expand my workshop. I'd like to see this plat map," I said carefully, "and I'll need to review my own survey documents." Of course, Gregory said, though his tone suggested he thought the matter was already settled. "I'm not unreasonable, Thomas. I'm willing to work something out. Maybe we can discuss compensation, or perhaps we can trade another section of property. But legally, that land is mine, and the fence will need to be moved." Martin added, "I'd recommend getting this sorted quickly. Property disputes can get expensive if they end up in court. Usually it's better to come to a friendly agreement." I kept my expression neutral. "I'll have my surveyor take a look." "Your surveyor?" Gregory's smile faltered slightly. "That seems excessive. Martin here is licensed and—" "I prefer to have my own professional assessment," I interrupted. "I'm not saying you're wrong, Gregory, but before I agree to give up 6 feet of property I paid for, I need independent verification." The atmosphere cooled immediately. Gregory folded his plat map with deliberate movements. "Suit yourself. But I'm telling you now, Thomas, this is the reality. That land is mine and will be proceeding accordingly. I hope we can resolve this amicably. They left, and I stood there looking at the fence, my mind racing. 400 square feet, my shed, part of my planned expansion. If Gregory was right, I'd have to tear down the shed, pay to move the fence, and lose valuable space. But something about the whole interaction felt orchestrated. The way Martin had appeared with his clipboard and measured sympathy, the pressure to work something out quickly. Gregory's sudden urgency about property values when he'd never mentioned selling before. I went inside and dug out my closing documents from the filing cabinet. The survey from 5 years ago was professionally done by Westfield Surveying, a reputable firm I'd verified before purchasing. It clearly showed the property line, marked with iron pins at the corners, and noted that the existing fence was approximately 2 feet inside my boundary on my side. 2 feet inside my property versus 6 feet inside Gregory's property. Someone was very, very wrong. I called Westfield Surveying first thing Monday morning. The receptionist connected me with Dale Kowalski, the surveyor who'd done my original assessment. I explained the situation, and Dale's response was immediate and firm. Mr. Pemberton is claiming 6 feet into your property, based on what documentation? He's got a photocopy of the original plat map from 1987, and a friend of his named Martin took some measurements. Dale made a disgusted sound. Let me guess, this Martin isn't a licensed surveyor. He said he does property consulting, which means nothing legally. Thomas, I've been surveying this county for 23 years. I know these neighborhoods. The plat map shows the original intended layout, but actual surveying is based on recorded measurements, iron pins, and legal descriptions. Your property line is exactly where I marked it 5 years ago. I'd stake my license on it. Would you be willing to do a new survey? I need something current to push back with. Absolutely. But I'll tell you right now, if your neighbor is trying to claim 6 feet of your land based on his friend's amateur measurements, he's either been badly misinformed or he's trying to pull something. I'll come out this Thursday, and I'll bring my complete equipment. We'll shoot every corner, verify every pin, and document everything. What do I owe you? Full resurvey with documentation will be $1,200, worth every penny when someone's trying to take your property. I agreed immediately. $1,200 was nothing compared to losing part of my land or the legal fees if this escalated. That evening, I did something I probably should have done years ago. I researched Gregory Pemberton. Public records showed he'd bought his property in 1995 for considerably less than current market value. His house had been refinanced 3 times, most recently 2 years ago. Interesting, but not conclusive of anything. Then I found the forum posts. There's a local neighborhood association website where residents discuss various issues. I'd never bothered joining, but you could search public posts without membership. I typed in Gregory's address and found a thread from 6 years ago, before I'd moved in, where several neighbors had complained about Gregory's attempts to claim their yard space for various reasons. One mentioned he'd tried to argue their driveway was partly on his land. Another said he'd insisted their tree was over his property line and demanded they pay for trimming. None of these disputes had apparently gone anywhere, but the pattern was clear. Gregory had a history of trying to expand his boundaries at his neighbor's expense. I screenshot everything. Thursday arrived, and Dale showed up at 8 in the morning with a younger assistant and an impressive array of surveying equipment. Gregory appeared on his porch almost immediately, arms crossed, watching with obvious displeasure. Dale set up his transit and GPS equipment, then spent the next 3 hours methodically working along the property lines. He used a metal detector to locate the original iron pins at each corner, then verified their positions with GPS coordinates and old survey records. His assistant took dozens of photographs and measurements. I watched from my porch with coffee. And Gregory watched from his. It would have been almost comical if it wasn't about defending my property. Around 11, Dale approached me with his field notes. Thomas, come take a look at this. We walked to the back corner of my property where it met the conservation area. Dale pointed to a metal pin barely visible in the ground, marked with orange paint spray. That's your southeast corner, exactly where it was 5 years ago and exactly where it was when this lot was originally surveyed in 1987. He walked me forward along what would be the property line. This fence here is 2 feet and 3 inches inside your property line along the entire run, not 6 feet into Pemberton's, 2 feet into yours. You've actually been giving him a buffer all this time. Can you prove that conclusively? I can prove it 6 different ways. Iron pins, GPS coordinates, county records, recorded plat measurements, historical surveys, and the legal description on your deed. All of them agree within 3 inches, which is standard tolerance. Your neighbor either has bad information or he's lying. Dale glanced toward Gregory's house. Want my professional opinion? He's hoping you won't pay for a real survey and will just agree to give him land to avoid conflict. I've seen it before. People think they can bully their neighbors into giving up property by acting confident and official. What do I do now? I'll have your full survey report ready by Monday with all documentation, photographs, and my professional certification. You take that to your neighbor and tell him the matter is settled. If he pushes back, you tell him you'll record the new survey with the county and send copies to his title company if he's really planning to sell. No title company will ensure a sale if there's a documented property dispute that the seller is on the wrong side of. What if he escalates anyway? Then you talk to a property attorney, but honestly, once he sees professional documentation proving he's wrong, most people back down. The ones who don't usually have something else going on. I thanked Dale and paid him. The rest of Thursday and Friday, I noticed Gregory staying inside, though I saw his curtains move whenever I was in the yard. The tension was building, and I knew confrontation was coming. The survey report arrived by email Monday morning, with hard copies coming via courier that afternoon. It was thorough, 23 pages of documentation, measurements, photographs, and legal descriptions. Dale had even included a comparison showing Gregory's claimed boundary versus the actual boundary, with the 6-foot discrepancy clearly marked as being in Gregory's imagination. I printed 3 copies, had them professionally bound, and prepared for what I knew would be an unpleasant conversation. Tuesday evening, I saw Gregory's car in his driveway and decided it was time. I walked over with one of the bound survey reports and knocked on his door. He answered quickly as if he'd been waiting. Thomas, I assume you've come to discuss the property situation. I have. Can I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. His living room was neat and impersonal, furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable. No family photos, just generic landscape prints. We sat in his formal seating area, and I placed the survey report on his coffee table. Gregory, I had a professional resurvey done by the same firm that did my original survey. This is a certified report with all documentation. The property line is exactly where my original survey showed it. The fence is 2 feet inside my property, not 6 feet inside yours. He picked up the report, flipping through it with an expression that shifted from confidence to confusion to something harder to read. This can't be right. Martin showed me. Martin isn't a licensed surveyor. This report is from Dale Kowalski, who's been surveying this county for over 20 years. Every measurement is documented and certified. The iron pins at each corner are exactly where they were placed in 1987 and verified in my purchase survey. Gregory set the report down carefully. I'll need to have Martin review this. Martin can review whatever he wants, but it won't change the facts. The property line is legally established and documented. I'm not giving you 6 feet of my land because your friend took some measurements with a tape measure. His expression hardened. You're being unreasonable. There's clearly a discrepancy here, and I'm trying to resolve it fairly. There's no discrepancy. There's you trying to claim land that isn't yours. I've documented everything, Gregory. I know about the other neighbors you've tried this with. I found the forum posts from 6 years ago about your driveway claims and tree disputes. His face flushed. That was different. Those were legitimate concerns about property maintenance. They were you trying to expand your boundaries. Just like this, but here's what's going to happen. I'm keeping my property as legally documented in this survey. The fence stays where it is. And if you continue to claim otherwise, I'll record this survey with the county, send copies to every title company in the area, and make sure any potential buyer of your house knows there's a property dispute that you're on the wrong side of. Gregory stood up abruptly. You're threatening me. I'm informing you of the consequences of continuing a false claim against my property. This survey is legal documentation. If you proceed with trying to claim my land, you'll be making a knowing false claim which has its own legal implications. Get out of my house. I stood calmly. Keep the survey report. Read it carefully. If you want to have your own surveyor come out, you're welcome to do that. But they'll find the same property line because that's where it actually is. This conversation is over, Gregory. Stay on your property, I'll stay on. Mine, I left before he could respond. My hands were shaking slightly as I walked back across the yards, adrenaline coursing through me. I'd never been good at confrontation, but something about defending what was mine had brought out a steel I didn't know I had. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then I came home Wednesday evening to find a letter taped to my door. It was from a local attorney, Harrison and Associates, representing Gregory Pemberton. The letter stated that their client disputed the boundary location and requested I agree to joint mediation before the matter proceeded to litigation. It was full of legal language about adverse possession, boundary disputes, and property rights. I photographed the letter and called Dale Kowalski. Gregory hired an attorney. Did they include any counter-survey or evidence? No, just demands for mediation and threats of litigation. Standard intimidation tactic. They're hoping you'll settle to avoid attorney fees. Do you have a property attorney? Not yet. Call Jennifer Wu at Wu and Partners. Tell her I referred you. She handles this stuff all the time and doesn't tolerate property grabbers. I called Jennifer Wu first thing Thursday morning. Her paralegal got me an appointment for that afternoon. Jennifer was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. I walked her through everything: Gregory's initial claim, Martin's measurements, my survey, the confrontation, and now the attorney letter. She reviewed Dale's survey report carefully, making notes. "This is clean documentation," she said finally. "Your surveyor did excellent work. The attorney Gregory hired, Harrison and Associates, I know them. They take cases like this on contingency, hoping for quick settlements. Once they see this survey, they'll likely advise Gregory to drop it. And if he doesn't, then we respond formally, assert your legal property rights, and make it clear that any continued false claims will result not just in dismissal but potential counterclaims for harassment and filing frivolous disputes. We can also file for your attorney fees if this goes to court and he loses, which he will. What do I owe you? I'll draft a response letter for $500. If it escalates beyond that, we'll discuss further representation. But honestly, I doubt it will. Boundary disputes based on solid surveys like this don't go anywhere." Jennifer had her response letter ready by Friday. It was 4 pages of legal precision, citing the survey, the iron pins, the legal description, and case law about property boundaries. It concluded by noting that any litigation would result in counterclaims and fee recovery, and recommended Gregory's attorney review the survey documentation carefully before proceeding. She sent it certified mail to both Gregory and his attorney. The weekend was quiet. I worked in my workshop, kept my yard maintained, and tried not to watch Gregory's house too obviously. I saw him leave Saturday afternoon and return Sunday evening, but there was no communication. Monday morning, I was leaving for work when Gregory's attorney, a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting suit, pulled into my driveway. He introduced himself as Paul Harrison and asked if we could talk. "I've reviewed the survey your attorney provided," he said without preamble. "It's solid documentation. I've advised my client that he doesn't have a viable claim to the disputed property." "Good. However, Mr. Pemberton is quite insistent that his property line is different from what your survey shows. I'm recommending he hire his own surveyor for an independent assessment. If that survey agrees with yours, which it likely will, he's agreed to drop the matter. He can hire whoever he wants. The property line isn't going to move." Harrison nodded uncomfortably. "Just so you're aware, Mr. Pemberton is considering whether the old fence being where it is constitutes adverse possession on his part." I almost laughed. "The fence is on my property and has been there for over 30 years. If anyone has an adverse possession claim, it would be me claiming more of his land, not the other way around. And I'm not doing that because I'm not trying to steal property." Harrison's expression showed he knew this was a losing argument. "I'll convey your position. Hopefully the independent survey will resolve this." He left, and I called Jennifer Wu to update her. She wasn't surprised. "They're grasping. Adverse possession requires open, notorious, and hostile use of property without permission. A fence 2 feet inside your own property line doesn't qualify. Let him waste his money on another survey." 2 weeks later, I was working in the yard when a surveying crew arrived at Gregory's house. Different company, different equipment, but the same process. They spent a full day shooting corners, checking pins, and documenting boundaries. I didn't approach them, just continued my work while keeping an eye on things. Gregory stood on his porch the entire time, and I could see his expression growing darker as the day progressed. The crew finished as the sun was setting. I watched their supervisor talk to Gregory, showing him something on a tablet screen. Even from my yard, I could see Gregory's shoulders slump. 3 days later, I received a formal letter from Harrison and Associates. It was brief. "After independent survey confirmation of the boundary location, our client withdraws all claims to the disputed property. This matter is considered resolved. No apology, no acknowledgement of the stress, expense, or time wasted. Just a clinical withdrawal. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong." Over the next 2 months, Gregory became increasingly hostile in passive-aggressive ways. He stopped acknowledging me entirely, turning his back if I was outside when he pulled in. He began mowing his lawn at 7 in the morning on Saturdays, right against the fence, making as much noise as possible. He installed motion sensor lights pointing toward my property that would trigger at the slightest movement, flooding my yard with light at all hours. Then he started filing complaints with the homeowners association. I came home to violation notices about my workshop being too industrial for a residential area, about my grass being inadequately maintained, about my vehicles being improperly parked. Every complaint was clearly retaliatory and easily defended, but each one required me to respond, attend HOA meetings, and provide documentation. The HOA board saw through it quickly, especially when I provided the timeline of complaints starting immediately after the property dispute. The board president, a woman named Diane, pulled me aside after one meeting. "Thomas, everyone knows what Gregory's doing. We're dismissing these complaints, but I wanted you to know he's also been lobbying to change HOA rules about property improvements, clearly targeting your workshop. He doesn't have the votes, but he's becoming a problem for the whole neighborhood. What can I do? Document everything. If his harassment continues, you might have grounds for a restraining order or civil action. Nobody here supports what he's doing." I took Diane's advice. I kept a log of every incident, every complaint, every hostile action. I installed security cameras covering my property, which immediately proved useful when Gregory called the police claiming I dumped yard waste on his property. The camera footage showed clearly that hadn't happened, and the responding officer was not pleased at the false report. Then came the incident that ended everything. I was in my workshop on a Saturday afternoon, working on a commissioned dining set when I heard shouting. I stepped outside to find Gregory in my yard, spray painting a line across my grass about 4 feet inside the fence. "What the hell are you doing?" he spun around, spray paint can still in hand, his face red. "Marking the real property line since you refuse to acknowledge it. This is where my land actually starts, and I'm tired of you pretending otherwise." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Gregory, you're on my property, vandalizing my lawn and making false claims about a boundary that's been legally surveyed twice. Leave now or I'm calling the police." "Call them. I have every right to mark my property line." "It's not your property line." "You know it's not. Your own surveyor confirmed it. You're trespassing and causing property damage." He threw the spray paint can down and it rolled across my grass, leaving a trail of orange. "You think you've won? You think hiding behind some survey makes you right? This neighborhood was better before you moved in with your noise and your trucks and your attitude." "My attitude? You tried to steal my land, and when you couldn't, you've spent months harassing me. I've documented everything, Gregory. Every HOA complaint, every hostile action, every false police report. You're building my case for me." "Your case? There is no case. I'm just protecting my property value from your—" He didn't finish because sirens interrupted him. My neighbor on the other side, an older gentleman named Harold, had apparently called the police when he heard the shouting. 2 officers arrived and quickly assessed the situation. I showed them the spray paint line across my yard, the can Gregory had thrown, and the camera footage I'd just recorded on my phone. Gregory tried explaining his position, but the officers weren't interested in property disputes. They were interested in the trespassing and vandalism happening right in front of them. "Mr. Pemberton, you're on his property, you've damaged his lawn, and you've admitted to it," one officer said. "We can either handle this as a civil matter where you pay for the damage and leave, or we can handle it as criminal trespass and vandalism, your choice." Gregory looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," I said calmly, "because I'm filing for a restraining order on Monday. I have months of documented harassment, false complaints, false police reports, and now this. You're going to stay away from me and my property, or you'll face legal consequences. I'm done being patient." The officer nodded approvingly. "That's a good idea, sir." "Mr. Pemberton, I strongly suggest you accept that these property boundaries are settled and stop this harassment." Gregory left without another word. The officers took a formal report, photographed the damage, and advised me on the restraining order process. Monday morning, I was at Jennifer Wu's office with all my documentation. She reviewed everything and smiled grimly. "This is textbook harassment. We'll file for a restraining order and include a demand for compensation for the lawn damage and your security measures. Judge Hernandez handles these, and she has zero tolerance for property harassment." The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Gregory showed up with Paul Harrison, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. I presented my timeline, photographs, videos, HOA complaint records, and witness statements from Harold and other neighbors about Gregory's behavior. Judge Hernandez listened to everything, reviewed the surveyor reports, and then turned to Gregory with an expression of barely concealed irritation. "Mr. Pemberton, you've been provided with multiple professional surveys confirming the property boundary. You filed false complaints, made false police reports, and engaged in property damage. This court finds clear evidence of harassment. The restraining order is granted. You are to stay at least 25 feet from Mr. Thomas's property line, have no contact with him directly or indirectly, and cease all complaints or actions related to the property dispute. Violation will result in immediate contempt charges. She looked at the damage estimates. You're also ordered to pay $1,500 in compensation for lawn restoration and security measures. Do you understand these orders? Gregory nodded stiffly. Yes, Your Honor. Good, because if I see you back in this court for violating this order, you'll be facing more than just civil consequences. Dismissed. I left the courthouse feeling a weight lift that I hadn't fully realized I'd been carrying. Gregory paid the $1,500 through his attorney the next week, and I used it to restore the spray-painted section of lawn and upgrade my security system. For a month, there was blessed silence. Gregory stayed inside mostly, and when I did see him, he immediately went the other direction. The HOA complaints stopped. The early morning lawn mowing stopped. It was like living next to a ghost, which was fine by me. Then the for sale sign appeared in Gregory's yard. I wasn't surprised, but I was curious about how it would play out. Within days, I started seeing potential buyers touring the property. Some of them would glance over at my place, and I made sure my yard looked immaculate and my workshop appeared professional and well-maintained. About 2 weeks into the sale process, a young couple knocked on my door. They introduced themselves as potential buyers of Gregory's house and asked if I'd be willing to answer some questions about the neighborhood. I invited them to sit on my porch, offered them iced tea, and answered honestly. I told them about the property dispute, the surveys, the harassment, and the restraining order. I showed them the survey documents and explained that the property boundaries were clearly established and documented. We thought there might be something, the husband said. The disclosure forms mentioned a resolved boundary dispute, but Mr. Pemberton claimed it was just a misunderstanding. The way he talked about you didn't match up with what we're seeing. Gregory tried to claim 6 feet of my property based on bad information, I explained. When professional surveys proved he was wrong, he spent months harassing me rather than accepting reality. I don't tell you this to scare you away from the house, but you should know what kind of neighbor he is if you're considering buying his property. They thanked me and left. 3 days later, they withdrew their offer. Over the next month, 4 different potential buyers came to talk to me. I told them all the same story, showed them all the same documentation. None of them bought Gregory's house. I learned later from Harold that Gregory's realtor had been furious, claiming I was sabotaging the sale. But I wasn't lying or exaggerating, just telling potential neighbors the truth about the situation they'd be buying into. If Gregory hadn't tried to steal my land and then harassed me for months, there would have been nothing negative to report. Eventually, Gregory dropped the price by $30,000, and a real estate investor bought it sight unseen as a rental property. Gregory moved out on a Tuesday morning while I was at work. I came home to an empty house next door, and I've never been more relieved to see a sold sign in my life. The new tenants who moved in a month later were a quiet family with 2 young kids. I introduced myself, explained there had been some issues with the previous owner but nothing that affected them, and welcomed them to the neighborhood. They've been excellent neighbors ever since. Looking back now, 3 years after Gregory first claimed my fence was on his property, I realize how close I came to just giving in to avoid conflict. If I hadn't spent the $1,200 on that survey, if I hadn't stood my ground during that first confrontation, I would have lost part of my property to someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The total cost of defending my property was about $4,000. The survey, the attorney fees, the lawn restoration, and various other expenses. But that $4,000 protected what was easily $20,000 worth of land value, to mention the principle of not letting someone steal from me. I learned several important lessons through this experience. First, documentation is everything. That professional survey from Dale Kowalski was worth far more than its cost because it provided irrefutable proof of the property boundaries. Without it, the dispute could have dragged on for years, costing exponentially more in legal fees and stress. Second, some people will absolutely try to take advantage of conflict avoidance. Gregory was counting on me being too polite, too busy, or too intimidated to challenge his claim. He'd apparently succeeded with this approach before, based on those forum posts from previous neighbors. The moment I showed I was willing to fight back with documentation and legal action, his entire strategy fell apart. Third, standing your ground early saves you grief later. When Gregory first made his claim, I could have tried to negotiate or compromise, giving him maybe 3 feet instead of 6 just to keep the peace. But that would have validated his approach and cost me land I'd paid for. By immediately getting a professional survey and refusing to budge, I established that I wasn't an easy target. Fourth, people who make false claims often escalate when they lose. Gregory's harassment after losing the property dispute was predictable in hindsight. He couldn't admit he was wrong, so he channeled his frustration into petty retaliation. Documenting everything from the beginning meant I had a clear record of his pattern of behavior, which made the restraining order straightforward to obtain. And finally, truth and evidence always win eventually, but you have to be willing to invest in proving the truth. If I'd relied on just my word against his, or tried to resolve it informally, Gregory could have continued. Claiming the boundary was disputed, but professional surveys, legal documentation, and formal court proceedings created a record that couldn't be argued with. The workshop I was so worried about losing is still right where it's always been, safely on my property. I've expanded it since then, adding another 200 square feet with all proper permits and documentation. The shed Gregory tried to claim is still standing, storing my tools and equipment. And the fence, that weathered cedar fence that started this whole mess, I finally replaced it last summer with a new privacy fence, still 2 feet inside my property line, exactly where it belongs. Sometimes I think about that moment when Gregory threw the spray paint can across my lawn, his face red with frustration and anger. He was so certain he was right, or at least so committed to his claim that he couldn't back down even when all evidence proved him wrong. I wonder if he ever admitted to himself that he was trying to steal from me, or if he genuinely convinced himself that some old plat map and his friend's amateur measurements trumped professional surveys and legal documentation. The answer doesn't really matter anymore. What matters is that I protected what was mine. I did it the right way through proper channels and professional verification, and I didn't let someone bully me into giving up something I'd worked hard to purchase and maintain. My new neighbors, the family with the 2 kids, are wonderful. The children play in their yard, their parents maintain the property well, and we have friendly conversations over the fence, the properly placed fence, about schools and local restaurants and ordinary neighborhood topics. It's what living next to someone should be like. Harold, my neighbor on the other side who called the police during the spray paint incident, told me something interesting last month. Apparently, Gregory had tried a similar boundary dispute with the people who lived in my house before I bought it. They were an older couple, and rather than fight it, they'd simply agreed to move the fence over a few feet to avoid conflict. So when I bought the house, I inherited a fence that was already further onto my property than it should have been, and Gregory saw a new owner as an opportunity to push even further. That explained why he seemed so confident in his claim and so shocked when I pushed back with professional documentation. He'd successfully done this before, taking a few feet here, a few feet there from neighbors who didn't want the hassle of fighting. I was apparently the first person who'd called his bluff with actual surveys and legal action. I'm glad I was that person. Not because I enjoy conflict, I don't, but because property rights matter. The land I own, that I pay taxes on, that I maintain and improve, is mine by legal right. Letting someone take it through intimidation or false claims would have set a precedent I couldn't live with. The spray paint line across my lawn is long gone, replaced with healthy grass. The motion sensor lights Gregory installed are gone too, removed by the property management company before the new tenants moved in. The only remaining evidence of the dispute is the survey documentation filed with the county, a permanent record that the boundaries are exactly where they've always been. I still have all the documentation stored in a fireproof safe in my workshop. The surveys, the attorney letters, the court orders, the photographs, the timeline of harassment. I probably don't need them anymore, but keeping them feels important somehow, a reminder of what I successfully defended and how I did it. My furniture business has grown significantly in the past 3 years. Without the stress of dealing with Gregory's harassment, I've been able to focus on expanding my client base and taking on more ambitious projects. The workshop that he tried to claim was illegally placed has produced dozens of custom pieces that I'm genuinely proud of. Every time I'm in there working with wood and seeing projects come together, I'm grateful I fought to keep it. There's a strange irony in the whole situation. Gregory was obsessed with property values, constantly worried about how everything affected his potential sale price. But his own behavior, the boundary dispute, the harassment, the restraining order, ended up costing him $30,000 when he finally had to drop his price to find a buyer. If he'd just been a decent neighbor, he could have sold his house for full market value and moved on with his life. Instead, his greed and his refusal to accept reality cost him far more than he ever could have gained by stealing a few feet of my land. The property he tried to take was worth maybe $20,000. The price reduction he had to accept to sell was $30,000. He literally lost money by trying to steal from me. I don't take satisfaction in that exactly. It's more like validation. The universe has a way of balancing things out when people act with bad intentions. Gregory tried to take what wasn't his, and he ended up losing because of it. Meanwhile, I protected what was mine, and I've prospered since. The conservation area behind our properties is beautiful in the fall when I'm writing this. The trees turn brilliant colors, and deer occasionally wander through the yards. I'll be sitting on my back porch with coffee on weekend mornings, looking at the fence line, the correct, properly placed, legally documented fence line, and feeling genuinely content with where I am. I think about the version of myself who stood in his workshop 3 years ago, hearing Gregory call his name, having no idea what was about to unfold. I want to tell that person that it's going to be stressful and expensive and frustrating, but also that it's going to be worth it. That standing your ground matters, that documentation and truth and proper process work. That bullies eventually lose when you refuse to be bullied, but mostly I'd tell that person to trust himself, to trust that the survey he paid for at closing was accurate, that the property he purchased is actually his, and that he has every right to defend it. To not second-guess himself when someone shows up with confidence and false claims. To know that being right and being able to prove you're right are powerful combinations that overcome a lot of aggressive bluffing. The fence is still there, exactly where it should be. My workshop is still producing furniture. My property is still mine, every square foot of it properly documented and legally defended. And I'm still here, having learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to give up what's rightfully yours. If I could offer advice to anyone facing a similar situation, it would be this. Get professional documentation immediately. Don't try to handle property disputes informally or take anyone's word about boundaries. Spend the money on a licensed surveyor, get everything in writing, and establish the facts before emotions and false claims muddy the waters. Second, don't be afraid of conflict when defending your rights. I'm not naturally confrontational, but learning to stand firm when I was clearly in the right was essential. Conflict avoidance is admirable until someone is actively trying to take advantage of you. Then it becomes self-destructive. Third, document everything. Every conversation, every incident, every claim. I never imagined I'd need months of harassment documentation for a restraining order, but having that complete record made the legal process straightforward. Cameras, written logs, saved emails, witness statements, all of it matters. Fourth, get proper legal advice early. Jennifer Wu's initial consultation cost $500 and potentially saved me tens of thousands in prolonged legal battles. She knew exactly how to handle the situation efficiently, and her expertise was worth every penny. And finally, don't let someone else's anger or frustration manipulate you into giving up what's yours. Gregory's escalating hostility was designed to make me regret fighting back, to make me think settling would have been easier. But easier in the short term would have meant living with the loss of my property forever. Standing firm through the difficult period meant winning permanently. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across my properly placed fence. Tomorrow I'll be back in the workshop, building a custom bookshelf for a client in the city. Next week I'm starting a dining table set that'll take me through the end of the month. The property I defended is producing value every single day, and the neighbor who tried to steal it is gone. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about being aggressive or confrontational. It's simply about knowing what's yours, being able to prove it, and refusing to surrender it to someone else's false claims and intimidation tactics. It's about believing that truth and documentation and proper legal process still matter, even when someone is shouting at you or spray painting your lawn. I defended my fence line, but what I really defended was the principle that rights mean something, that ownership has value, and that you don't have to surrender to bullies who think confidence and aggression can overcome facts and evidence. The fence is still there. I'm still here. And the property line is exactly where it's always been, properly surveyed, legally documented, and permanently mine. That's my story. It's not dramatic in the sense of courtroom revelations or explosive confrontations, though it had elements of both. It's dramatic in the quieter sense of standing firm against someone trying to take what you've worked for and winning because you were willing to invest in proving the truth. If you're facing something similar, know that it's worth fighting for what's yours. Get the documentation. Stand your ground. Don't let false claims and intimidation tactics work. The truth, when properly documented and defended, is powerful enough to overcome aggressive bluffing every single time. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply keeping what was always yours and watching the person who tried to take it fail because they were fundamentally, provably, legally wrong. My name is Thomas, and 3 years ago my neighbor tried to steal my land. The survey results didn't just make him move. They proved that standing your ground, documenting the truth, and refusing to be bullied is the right choice, every single time. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone else who's facing a similar situation know that they're not alone, and that defending your property rights is worth the effort, the expense, and the temporary stress. What you protect today is yours to keep forever.